I think it's really very important, right? I think it's important for everybody to have mentors. It's important for everybody to have the opportunity to network with similarly minded people. So that I feel is really good. Jean has joined us. Do you know Jean? Jean is part of our core team at Unleashed, and is a fantastic champ. She is just so nice to work with.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. I don't think we've met in person or even virtually, I think.
No, I think it's the first time. Yeah.
Here you go. You're Swiss-based as well?
So I'm based in Switzerland, yes.
Yeah, well then, congratulations to you as well. You guys doing great in the Euro.
She's French.
No, actually, I'm French. I'm still supporting the French team, so that was a tough moment for me.
Got it. So we have people in the company that are excited and people that are not. So.
I know, it was really funny because in the first meeting I had with Jean and another colleague of mine, Val, they're both French. I wore my my Swiss soccer sweater or shirt, and they were very unhappy with me. Yeah. So I see people coming in slowly. I think what with Eventbrite, it is the invitation is funny because what you have to do is to then go into Eventbrite and then re-register, log in, and then click on the link. So if people did that at 4 o'clock, they will take at least a minute to get that done.
All right.
Yeah. Hey guys who are on the phone, you know, you can put your videos on to say hello. Hey Guillaume, hi.
Hello.
Hey, nice to see you. Hi Guillaume.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
So Guillaume, are you still at the hospital?
Yes.
I see that you have got your gear on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Guillaume is a vet at in France. So Guillaume, I'm really sorry about the French team, but I'm very happy.
Right. Hi, Michael. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Looking forward to getting your questions as well, if you are interested or if you have any.
Right, I'm just going to let people come in for the next 1 or 2 minutes. It does happen a little bit like this, so that's really good. I can hear all these ringing sounds. They've all gone into Eventbrite at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, I keep admitting it's true that yeah, the process is a bit long if you need to sign up again to get the link.
Yeah, I think we need to give some feedback to Eventbrite.
All right, I keep admitting. Welcome everyone.
Yes, welcome. I see some familiar faces. I see or names. I don't see your faces. I see Andrew. Hey, Andrew. Good to see you. Very nice to see you.
Hey, Andrew.
Hey, how's it going?
Good to see you.
Yeah, it's like a family, right? We all know each other. Hey, Nora, I see you as well. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good. So you're having midsummer in Finland?
Yes, we have warm summer here. I don't know, do you have snow or something? What
No, I think the snow comes from your part of the world.
I read in the news today that in Germany they have snow somewhere. I don't know if that was a fake news or something. I don't know.
Yeah, must be fake news. Yeah. Hey, Finland did very well at the Euro as well. I think you guys went a lot further than you expected. So
yeah, it was the first time ever.
Yeah. So now all the Swiss people want to talk about is football. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So we'll change
Yeah, that's not nice.
the topic of this conversation. Good. So I see a lot of people in already. So guys, welcome. I think I'm just gonna slowly start so that we don't waste this precious opportunity with Michael. I just want to mention that we are recording this session for people many people have asked me to record it. So Michael, I hope that's fine with you. So just to introduce myself, my name is Kim Bill. I head up the Purina Accelerator Lab. I think we know most of you and you know me. And we run the first and only pet care accelerator in EMENA, so Europe, Middle East, and North Africa. And we have a pet startup community for founders in the region. So this invite has mainly gone to our community of founders, of pet care founders, pet startup founders. And of course, our purpose is to network, to inspire each other, maybe even collaborate when there are opportunities. And generally, lifting each other up. We are like-minded people who are passionate about pets, and we want to find solutions to address pet parents' pain points. So if you are from EMENA, please join us in this community. I also want to start before I go into the conversation with Michael. It will be, not correct of me not to congratulate our 6 winners of the Unleashed batch in 2021. We start our batch in June and we'll end in December. So this year we've got these 6 fantastic startups that we are going to work with. Nora, who is on the phone, she was one of our alumni members from last year. So very excited about that. And I really mentioned, join the community if you are a pet founder, and we will have sessions like this with, with people like Michael who have really done well, and we want to pick his brains, right? Because this is what the community does. So here we are going to talk about Mike's fantastic journey and how he has recently raised that 35 million, whopping 35 million in the US. So I'm going to ask him some questions. And here I've just kind of taken some pictures of the GPS tracker for both cats and dogs. And I'm sure that Michael, you will talk a little bit more about this. So I just want to give a little bit of a background on Tractive, and Michael, please feel free to interrupt me if I got it wrong. You are based in Austria. You founded the company in 2012, and you launched the tracker in 2013. So you're about, well, the tracker on the market, 8 years old. The company is about 9 years old. You have got over 100 employees, that you built up over these 9 years. And as far as I know, Michael, you've been more or less bootstrapped till this Series A. You had some small funding, not very big, but you've basically been doing all this on your own. So this is an incredible story. And now in May of 2021, you have raised this Series A, this whopping 35 million that will actually help you in your activities in the US. So we'll talk a little bit more about it. So I just want to go into the business you're in. That's really important. You've got your flagship GPS device that you see on the slide right now. It is a wearable. You've got apps. It's for real-time location tracking for dogs and cats. You've got of course, the live tracking, virtual fencing. You have got virtual fencing settings and alerts, and you also have activity and fitness tracking. So you are able to leverage this collected activity, the sleep, motion data, so that pet parents can actually be informed of any potential health issues or concerns. So that's your product. And every time I talk to you, you tell me that your active subscribers, I remember talking to you maybe a year or a couple of months back, was 300,000 active subscribers. Then it became 350. And the last I've heard from you, you've got more than 400,000 active subscribers in more than 175 countries. So my gosh, this is such an accomplishment, such great work. And Michael, I know that you are a software engineer. You have worked at Microsoft, Amazon in the US. Maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about how you started this the company Tractive, and a little bit about your founder story.
Absolutely. Happy to. Well, thanks for the introduction. Well, I guess one thing I want to correct is I haven't done this all by ourselves, or by myself, while we have been bootstrapped for pretty much all the time until this investment. I think it's not been me. It's been me and my co-founders and literally the entire team, and we work very closely, and we have a very strong team, which I believe is also a huge part of the success, or the reason for success, is just having the right people on board. As for the funding story, I had some background. Sorry, can you guys mute yourself if you don't talk, because I have an echo. I still hear someone.
No, I think it's fine now.
All right. Excellent. Yes, it should be better now. All right. So how did we start? I had some background in GPS tracking before, and as you said, worked in the US, worked initially for Microsoft and then for Amazon, where we were actually looking for a friend's dog one afternoon, which has escaped. And he called me and a bunch of friends over, and he said, let's quickly roam the area. Must be somewhere. And it was a small little beagle that whenever you let it off the leash and didn't watch the fence closely, it would escape. And then if you have a beagle or have had to deal with a beagle, you know what this means. Anyways, it took us about 2.5 hours to find the dog. And during that time, we were all software engineers and hardware engineers talking about there must be a solution. And it was early 2012 back then. So it was already the times of the iPhones. I guess less connected than today, but still a lot of wearables and devices were around. This was still even before the Fitbit times. And we wondered that there's not a single product on the market, because we looked it up on Amazon and Craigslist and whatever else we checked at that point. We didn't find a product that would actually do this. And that's what sparked the idea. And a few days later, I convinced 2 former colleagues from university to just develop this product, because we understood the market is huge, the opportunity is huge. And with my GPS tracking background and engineering background, together with my co-founder's background, I knew that this is something that could be successful. And I always had at the back of my head when I worked for Amazon that if I spent the time and effort and energy that I spent for Jeff Bezos, if I spent that on my own company with the right people, it can only be successful. And that's how naive I kind of was to go back to Austria and actually start this without funding, without any idea how this should work, but always, and I think that's something for people that aspire to be founders, something that was really great for me was that I knew that I always could go back to Amazon or to my previous job or anywhere in Amazon, because I had good connections there, and I think I always left on good terms. So that gave me kind of like the risk-free trial situation. So I moved back to Austria, started the team, started small, very quickly knowing that we needed to make money very early on, because we were, first of all, nobody had experience in the startup world. Nobody knew what venture capital was, at least not amongst our founders. And so we just knew, okay, what we have is time, and what we have is knowledge, and we know we can build this. And that's how we started. And we knew we have to make money from pretty much day one. So we wanted to launch something very quickly. And one of the things before I committed to do this is I told my co-founders, let's take the money that we need in order to have a booth at CES in Las Vegas in 2013. Because I know if we all dig up that money and basically have this commitment, then we know we will have a product at that point, because we cannot go to CES and not show a product. And that was our extrinsic motivation, if you will, to say, you know what, this is money committed, so we better go and do it. And that's why we have decided to book the booth and to develop and work on the hardware, on the software day and night. And we did have a product at CES. It was not launch ready at that point, but it worked. It looked the way it should look, or we wanted it to look. And that's kind of like the early days, and we started shipping 3 or 4 months later in Europe very quickly, then also international, which we later then dialed back to Europe again, because we knew that we understand Europe well in terms of multiple languages that we had in the team. We know the countries, we know the currencies, we know a little bit the setup of how distribution and sales work in Europe, which is quite different from the US or many other countries. And so I guess one of the very smart decisions in hindsight was to very much focus regionally on Europe, or to focus on a specific area, to focus on pets, which has always been one of the most important things for us, to say, yes, we could build a GPS tracker for kids or cars or bicycles or anything else, but we always said we'd rather be the best in one vertical than have kind of like this average product that suits all, right? And it's always tempting if large electronics companies come to you and say, hey, we would order 20,000 if you put it in a watch form factor for kids or for elderly people or whatever it is. And we always said no, and we're stood true to being really focused on the pet market, and within pets, very specifically cats and dogs. And I think that was that the continued focus it really has helped us to understand what we do. And we always knew that when we do well in Europe, understanding languages and currencies and all that, it's going to be easier for us to later go to the US, this one big country with pretty much one language and one currency. It's probably going to be a lot easier for us to do that than for a competitor from the US to come to Europe, looking at the fragmented landscape here, looking at the, again, countries, languages. This is why we strongly focused on Europe. And now we felt ready to go to the US, which is when what we did last year in July, so about a year ago. We're now building up a team there, have already, I think, 6 or 7 people in the US. And trying to expand this.
US a little bit later. Thanks, Michael. I think this is really great. I think what you said is that you kind of worked backwards, right? You without the product, you already booked a booth at the CES, and you kind of had to then force the whole team to come up with a prototype to show at the CES. I think that's a great lesson. And the other lesson the message I got is that you needed to focus, do one thing really, really well instead of trying to do many things. And that's what I see when we talk to some startups. We find that there are just so many solutions, people get confused. So I think that's really a great message. So this first 8 years at Tractive, Michael, were there at times you felt, my gosh, I have to give up for the lack of funding or for the lack of the right people? How did you persevere? It cannot be easy, right? You said you don't know anything about the startup world. There was no VCs in your mind at that time.
Yeah. So I think for us, we always knew that we need to make money. And I always said from day one, I said, as soon as we make €1 of revenue, we have a dial that we can adjust and optimize so that it's €2 next month and then €3 the month after. So as soon as you have some kind of revenue stream and somebody's actually willing to pay you for your product, at that point you can start to optimize. And were there up and downs? Yes, they're still here, right? And you might read that in startup books or entrepreneurial books that the startup life is a roller coaster. I keep saying it's like the highs are higher than that and the lows are lower than that. And I think if you've been in this world for a little bit, you will, I think everybody will understand. Plenty of situations, especially at the beginning, since we started without external funding, right? We had very limited money to even pay employees. So we, again, had to wait until we made first revenues, but we also got some government grants, a few €100,000 in total, that helped us over that. And we always were extremely frugal and extremely trying to be very, very cash efficient. So we had our office space was IKEA at best. That was the kind of the premium desks were IKEA, and the rest was just whatever we could get from somewhere. And so we tried to be cash efficient. We tried to be efficient with the resources, efficient with people as well, and really focused on creating the right product, because we knew that at some point that would actually pay back. But yes, there were a lot of times where we or certainly I thought, I'm not going to continue from here, or I gotta stop this. And luckily, we had also good friends who were in the startup world already back then. That they did run Testic, a running app that was actually acquired by Adidas a few years ago. But the guys were just always like about 2 years ahead of us, and they were good friends. 2 years ahead of us in terms of size and revenue and all those kinds of things. And that was extremely helpful to us because they had been through a lot of the things that we have seen. So I guess also one major learning is talk to other people in the field, or especially to some that are 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, because they will let you know that it's completely normal that there are days where it just doesn't work out.
So it's this great mentorship and friendship and networking, right? I think this is all about having a support system some way or other. Julian had a question whether there was any crowdfunding campaign. I don't think so. I think Michael's really talked about the fact that, you know, they really bootstrapped and very small amounts of money, but that really drove them to be profitable ASAP. That was really the mantra, as far as I've heard from Michael. And you talked about focus in Europe, Michael. So, you know, for Europe, for Europeans, it's a bit complex, right? I mean, did you start just really making sure that your MVP and your product went well in Austria before you went to Germany and Switzerland, and then went off to, you know, maybe UK and so on? How was your market entry strategy like?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if you grow up in a country like Austria that's tiny, right, you pretty much know, if you think on a national level on creating a product for Austria, the market is comparatively tiny, and you pretty much lost it on that day when you think I'm gonna start here and see what happens. So what we did is we initially immediately started to create our product in English and German, and very quickly looked for people to help us translate, like from students at university, native speakers for Italian, Spanish, and French. So we had a kind of like what we call our 5 core languages for the core European market ready. And then we made sure our product, technological wise, works anywhere in Europe or really anywhere in the world. And once we had those 2 things, it becomes comparatively easy to scale that, because obviously for a software product, it's very easy. You push a button, you're anywhere in the world, right? As soon as you touch hardware, it's going to be a little bit more challenging. But what we did is we made sure we have our shipping set up to the different countries. We adhere to the different laws in different countries, which luckily in a lot of cases is the same because it's EU, or at least where it's EU. So that was not too challenging, but I think we had from the beginning this global thought, and we knew that if we would just do German and just do Austria, there's not a chance that we win. And we wanted to make sure, we always wanted this to become big, and so that's why we thought international from day one, something that I would highly recommend to anyone else as well, to always keep localization and translation very early in the plan.
Fantastic. So really think international from the start, and, you know, perhaps do your stuff in English to start off with, and then translate. Now that's a very good lesson. So with all this success in Europe, what I remember talking to you, Michael, and that's when you started to have a soft launch of your LTE tracker in summer in 2020 in the US. And I remember that fantastic partnership you had with Amazon, and, you know, with the new Pack series hosted by Lindsey Vonn. Of course, I'm a ski fan. Lindsey Vonn is an idol of people from the Alps, and her dog Lucy, and they were taking dogs and their owners around the world in an adventure globe trotting series. And I remember putting that on the Slack channel, and everybody was congratulating you. And then you also donated 1,000, I think, of your GPS trackers to dog shelters worldwide, so that, you know, people got peace of mind and they got to know your trackers, and it was all like a campaign. So how important was that in your launch in the US and subsequently in your fundraising? Did that help to bring people, or at least your investors, on top of Tractive, on top of their minds?
Yeah, so I think being part of this Amazon DPEC or kind of contributing there was extremely helpful for general awareness, category awareness, while while they never said or talked about Tractive, it was still a lot of media around it, and people saw on the TV show the devices, and they kind of like got in touch with our brand or with our product. So that was extremely helpful and helped us with our soft launch in the US, and we quickly saw sales obviously spike on Amazon, but also on other channels. And having good growth numbers in a new market, in a large market that you go into, is always something that that you want to be able to show when you talk to an investor, right? And if you can show impressive growth and then the imagination with investors quickly goes wild. What if we start to add, just to throw some random things out there, Brazil or Mexico or China or India, right? Or anything else, right? I mean, if you show it in one country, there's no reason why it wouldn't work in another country. Interestingly enough, since then, I think we have been contacted by literally over 100 TV series producers for all kinds of partnerships, corporations, which is great. But we're not a product placement company either. So, but it was very, very helpful for us for sure.
Oh, that's really good. So there's a question on in the chat. So guys, if you want to ask Michael any questions, please go ahead. So there's a question about the correct product we want to create. So at that time, so we're going back 8 years. It was very early for you, and how did you really have the insights to decide what was the right product to create?
Well, I mean, we tried to listen very closely to what the customers said, and we gave devices out very early on, and very closely with people that have used them. We tried to be like have a customer service that's like above and beyond, and like to call customers and to do everything to make them happy, but also then to tell them, hey, we're a small company, we're trying to learn from this. Any feedback is helpful. Tell us that we're great. We want to hear that, but even more important, tell us what the things are that don't work or that you would do different, right? And the typical things were, I want it smaller. I want the battery to last longer, right? Two of the kind of hardest challenges on the technical side. But there was a lot of things around usage, around how people use the app. So we talked to a lot of customers. Listen to that. We added live chat very early on the website to kind of understand what are the pre-sales questions, what are the things people want to know ahead of time, but also for technical customer service to be able to quickly talk to the people and learn from them, and then incorporate this into our product roadmap. So we never thought about what feature will we do in 6 months or in 12 months. We really thought about the next 1 or 2 months. And the smaller the company is, the faster and more agile, I guess, you are to incorporate that and listen to that and very, very quickly turn things around, prototype things. And since customers that we worked with closely or our heavy users from the early days, we implemented more or less their suggestions or ideas very quickly. That was extremely, they loved that, right? So the word of mouth was great, and they loved us and they cheered for us. So that was how we try to do that. And obviously there are times where you have to do things that customers don't ask for because they don't know this exists or they don't know this is possible, and just try things and quickly learn and quickly improve, I guess.
Fantastic. So there are a lot of questions about your product, but I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about your competition and about your fundraising, right? And then we can go back to your product. Yeah. So I remember once you told me that your biggest challenge is that there's a very low awareness of the category. So I think with all the work that you've done, the awareness has grown very much. And around the same time, when you were raising your fund and it was all over the news, we also saw a competitor of yours, Five from New York, right? So they have basically a very similar kind of, at least in the description, a very similar product, geofencing, GPS tracking, activity data, early signs of detections of diseases, etc. And they only started in 2019. And during that time, they raised 30 million, I think, in February of 2021. So and altogether, I think they've already raised 40 million. Of course, it's a US company. There's more money in the US apparently. And even in their Series A and B, they were raising a lot more than in Europe, right? And of course, there's so many pets. I'm sure that we need more than one GPS tracker. We need a whole ecosystem of trackers, I believe. But did that actually help you to actually create this category awareness? Was it actually actually beneficial for Tractive that FI had actually raised this amount in February and then you came in. So instead of looking at it as a competitor, you're actually looking at it in improving the ecosystem. Quite interested in your thoughts on that.
Did it help us? I think it didn't hurt us, but so I think FI announced somewhere around end of February. This is where we were pretty much in the very final stages of the investment round already. We only made it public once, you know, all the due diligence is done, all the paperwork is done, and then for various reasons pushed that out another 6 weeks. So I think timing we were actually pretty similar, and at least I was not aware of them raising. You hear that here or there when you talk to investors, and they kind of like heard about it or something like that. But one of the things we always did is we never looked at competition really to kind of like make us fear things, but we are very friendly with our competitors or people in our field, and I think that's actually not the case. So we don't know the FI guys, let's put it that way, but I know pretty much any other player in the world of GPS tracking and activity monitoring, and we regularly have conversations, or I have conversations with the founders of those companies, because for us the biggest challenge is 8 out of 10 dog owners don't know this category, right? So what can we do together? Yes, we might fish in the same pond, but the pond is huge, right? And there are very similar challenges that we have. But to go back to the question, so yes, obviously it helps when you're in an investment round and you see and somehow the product category gets vetted in another transactions, knowing that your business is at least from a numbers perspective in terms of user numbers, right? At least those are the metrics that I know are quite significantly larger than something else, right? We have a very different approach in terms of how we go regionally, and aside from the product, which at the end of the day, a lot of things, as you mentioned, is very similar. But also then if you start from scratch and want to do it in a very short time, you need to burn a lot of cash, right? That's why they needed the money. Being in the US, which is traditionally more expensive on the marketing side, and in multiple areas, competition is larger. So that's why there's a lot more cash need, right? Even if you look at the third amongst the 3 large players in the US, Whistle, who have burned a lot of money before their acquisition, and I think to this day struggling to be anywhere close to profitability. We have created our business highly profitable over here. Now it's for us, now we're just translating that to the US market, so it's a little bit of a different story. But overall, the press, the media, the attention, and the dollars spent in marketing are going to help the category. And I always said to any competitor, please start with TV advertising and stuff like that, because it's going to help all of us, and I'd rather you pay for it than me.
Good one. Yeah. So how important was this when you were pitching to your US investors? How important did they really focus on the product features? What were they more interested in? Were they interested in the team more than anything else? Were they interested in your traction, your numbers? What were the most important things in your pitch?
Mm-hmm. So I think I have to go one step back on how we approached this round. We did not go out like a more traditional VC round where you kind of like share your pitch deck with 100 investors or 80 investors or whatever, and then see what comes back. But we had a lot of investor interest before, and we always said we don't need an investment. And eventually decided then a few months before we started the round that it's a good time for the US, especially if we want to push hard in the US, to actually raise funding. And we had a handpicked list of a very short list. It was less than 10 investors that we had on our list that we had previous conversations for. So recommendation to everyone, if you look to raise a larger round at a certain point, which would at least what we consider a larger round, then start the conversations early. Have those calls every 3, 4, 5, 6 months with the investors that understand your field, have done stuff in the pet area, or are somehow familiar with the business or business area that you are in, because then it's going to be a lot easier once the day comes, and especially if you continue to kind of like show the numbers that you actually kind of like promise that you'll show. So we had those conversations with again less than 2 handful of investors, and all of them showed great interest. Obviously the pet space is extremely interesting now to investors because everything in the pet space is growing, whether it's pet insurance or whether it's the Chewies of the world, the pet food companies obviously not struggling either. So there's it's great timing for the pet industry. And then I think one of the things that we're obviously some of interest for our investors is our business model, which is recurring revenue based, and that's always to a certain degree challenging. So people actually understand, customers understand why they have to pay regularly and how to make that work. But then also out of this model where you only get €5 a month, you're potentially losing money on the hardware. Kind of like, how can you prove that the customers stay? How can you prove that that you have great retention or little churn? And that's what we have optimized over the years, and that you can only do if you continue to improve the product and kind of like deliver, because otherwise people will cancel their subscription tomorrow and they're gone. And that's what impressed the investors. And also kind of like having the conversations over such long period of time, and always talking to them about numbers and growth and where we would be 6 months from now. And they're smart, right? They take their notes, and if they see that you did that or outperformed it, then that's always impressive to them. So they actually start to believe you. And on the day that you raise money, you show them the pitch deck, and they already know, okay, they have delivered in the past. And if you have that, you're in a great situation to go out and raise.
Yeah, so it's not a cold call. So I would encourage all startups to start discussing and networking with investors, and it's going to be long. It's not going to be a fast fix. So get to know people, form a relationship, like Michael had said. Now, Michael, you said that recurring subscription is one of the things that investors are looking for. Yeah, I mean, we see it in everything, right? I mean, that's why people are really interested in food and so on, because we got to eat 3 times a day. Your pets eat maybe twice a day, and so there's always a recurring thing. And one of your strengths is really understanding how to retain customer loyalty, how to the subscription model is something that you are very, very strong, and you've got very low churn. I think the last time we said you had got like single-digit churns. Can you share some tips, some high-level tips as to how people can actually work on subscription models?
Well, I think there's not a very generic rule, but there's a lot of things that you can take a look at, right? It's always offering the customers what they want. Some people want to purchase a monthly subscription. Some people want to use an annual subscription. How you price that is something that we've played around with and learned a lot over the years. And this pricing is very different in different countries. And how not to be too aggressive in terms of upselling the customers, but also making sure that you keep the customers that you have on the retention side by providing them a product that they actually use. So what we see is there's always the customers that pay you over time a certain percentage, that pay you, but they don't use your product anymore. But it's always been an effort on our side to make sure we understand those people, because we said, yes, they are paying customers, and yes, they actually don't produce any cost on our side. So on one hand, good customers, but I think it's the better customers, and the retention is better by customers that are engaged and use the product. So we always try to make sure when we have the average customer usage time of X month or years, we try to, how can we get to 10% more? What are the things that we do to increase engagement and make sure people continue to recharge the device, continue to use the device, because we knew that if they use the device, they put it on the collar, which is at the end of the day word of mouth again, and it's going to help us. So, and that is one of the biggest things that helps retention. And then also looking at involuntary churn, which means is everything that you can do if a customer, to not lose a customer that doesn't want to leave. But like credit card expires, to inform customers early your credit card is going to expire, or to evaluate payment methods depending on how easily people churn with it accidentally, because they might have insufficient funds, or they might some payment types just churn more or less. And that's also again different in all different countries. So we have learned a lot through that and looked at every number, started with data and BI around subscriptions very early on, and that has helped us optimize that.
Yeah, that's those were really good tips. Thanks a lot for that. And like you mentioned, you were very selective with your investors. I see that in your new funding, you actually had 2 investors, right? You only accepted the money from 2, and they were both like in the field already. And one of them is actually somebody who's got subscription expertise as well. So how did you choose the investors? You said that you had a long list. How did you actually choose the last 2 that you're willing to get money from? Actually, you're in that good situation.
Yeah, so I think on the investor side, we had a list of 50 plus that we had conversations with before, and that we had on kind of like our list, and we had notes on. We picked I think 8 of them initially, had the conversations with them and said, hey, we are now in the situation, this is how much money we want to raise. What we looked at is understanding of the pet industry, having previous experience in the pet field, whether it's the partners that work there, or whether it's previous investments or portfolio investments, or even some of the things that were mentioned in previous conversations that are not publicly known everywhere, on why that is. And that's how we have chosen kind of the short list. And everyone we talked to, I think with I think only 1 or 2 exceptions, everyone were so literally everyone listened to our pitch and had a second conversation, and I think only 2 did not come forward with the term sheet, but they kind of like indicated us where they would be in terms of valuation and terms, but it was not a pure valuation game for us either. And at the end of the day, the ones we chose, especially with Guidepost, they are in the US. We knew we wanted to go in the US. They had previous companies, B2C companies from Europe that invested in that. They helped jumpstart in the US. They had experience in the pet industry, and I think that's really crucial as well. We had fantastic conversations with the partners there, and I felt like this is a conversation like I want to have with a board member, and not somebody with a suit and tie and kind of like telling me how to run the business, but really saying like, I want to be a resource. I want to be helpful to you wherever you need me, but I'm not going to interfere with the business while things are running well. But let me be a resource for you. And that's how this came together. And I think in hindsight, there was a lot of contacts that reached out why I wouldn't have asked them for investment or some of those. But I think it's important to think of an investor that you want to work with for a longer time, that this is somebody that you have to spend a lot of time with, and not a pure financial investor, unless you're just thinking monetarily and you just need funding for the company and don't want anyone to interfere with the business. But in our case, I think it was a very wise choice, and so far we haven't regretted it.
Very good. Now, so were they very, I would say not strict, but were they very careful with what you did with this money? I mean, you mentioned in your press release what you were going to do. You're going to get people, you're going to do distribution and so on. How important was it to these people that this money was spent in the US and not, in your global outlook, the global strategy for Tractive?
Well, we had a plan, obviously. When you do a round like this, you need to show a plan and say, hey, this is our growth plan. This is our next 3, 4, 5 steps in terms of regional growth and operational growth and team growth, and how do you spend the money, and kind of like what are the things that you try. For us, it's building the team, and it's creating market awareness, and a big chunk of this will be in the US. There will also be obviously some for Europe. But I certainly didn't put together a very detailed plan, like this is how much we're going to spend on Google and on Facebook and on TV and on this and that. But we had a lot of ideas, or we have a lot of ideas and partnership ideas as well, that we want to start doing. And then we will follow what works. And I think that's the only realistic case that you can do, because there's no reason for me to commit today where to spend X million in the next X month, not knowing whether there's any efficiency in there or anything like that. Like this is not how we think, especially always having been very cash efficient. We want to make sure we understand where we put the money, and then scale wisely.
So I have a comment here, and somebody had said that, wanted to ask, whether you're going to do things differently for your new US launch. And if your product offering or subscription plans are different. And this person added the comment that it's so nice to see you succeed, as most companies have gone away.
Yeah, there have been companies going away in our field too. I think some for financial reasons, some for probably strategic decisions they have made, and some for quite a few actually that have left kind of the surface for product reasons, because it sounds so easy to take a GPS module and a GSM module and put it on a board, and you got a GPS tracker, and then only realize it gets really, really hard when you miniaturize it because of the antennas and all those things. So I think one of the key steps here was from day one making sure that we have a product that actually works. I think that's the key. And then having a profitable business model and a profitable business, or making sure you're not losing on the individual customer. And once you're in that situation, so for me, I don't fear even an economic downturn or anything like that, because I know that the business and the structure that we have built is savvy and is profitable. And once you have that, it's going to be a lot easier. But if you're venture funded and you pour in money and you're burning money every month, it's just a different strategy, right? And at the end of the money, you basically say, you know what, I have a product that works and it now becomes profitable, or you raise again. And if you can't raise, then that's the story, right? And what is different in the in the US? Was that another question? So I think it's technologically slightly different because of how LTE works in the US, but overall the product is very similar to what we have in Europe, and the subscription models and pricing is also very similar in the US than it is in different European countries, though we always do different tests in terms of pricing and how we have that set up to learn what resonates with customers and obviously at the end of the day works for us as well.
So there are two questions about the US. How big of a team you're planning for the US in the short term? And how long did it take you to raise this fund in the US? Just for planning purposes, I guess, for some startups.
Yeah. So I'll start with the later question. We had the first conversations in December with the selected funds that we wanted to talk to. Had the first conversation, second conversations in January, and then by mid February we chose kind of like our top three, where we had the term sheets and really looked at them in detail, had more detailed conversations. They were all fairly similar in terms of size and valuations. There were higher ones too, which we didn't select, but at the end of the day, this is what felt right. And then from I think end of February or maybe March, April timeframe was when we had about 4 weeks of due diligence, where if you've never done a due diligence, where more or less the investor checks your business, whether everything you said before is actually true. They kind of like pull down your pants and then check everything on your business side, obviously, right? And once they know your shoe size and everything else, then they're happy and they say yes, that's good, which happened in our case as well. And then it's just about finishing some of the paperwork and the legal contracts. So overall, I guess I would say about 4 to 5 months. Could probably have been slightly longer if we didn't have the first conversations already with some of the investors before.
And all this happened during the COVID, right, Michael? I mean, this was a time when nobody was traveling and so on. So you did everything through Zoom.
Yes, we have never met, and to this day not met our investors in person, which is something that I know that about a year ago in conversations with investors, just like regular catch-up calls, people would say, yeah, it's good to have those conversations, but obviously once there is a deal, we have to see the office, right? I mean, like our investors, they don't know whether we have a real, I mean, I guess they checked through lawyers or whatever, but they weren't here. But thanks to Zoom or Teams or technology, right, this has become a lot easier.
And so is the biggest difference? Another question between pitching to European investors. Now, I don't know whether you actually pitched to European investors at all. So what was the big difference between European investors and US investors? Do they look for different things? Are they caring about different, is there a cultural difference?
So we talked to both European and US investors. I think US investors generally think a little bit bigger. I think it's the faster to understand the big opportunity and think less in smaller European markets, but really in kind of like potential to scale and understanding the scaling game, right? Growth is one thing, and really scaling a business, if you want to do 10x instead of like 1.5x, that's the US mindset, and that's something that really immediately seeing, hey, we can apply this to that, and we can hook it up to this, and so it's I would say in our experience, in my experience, US investors just think 3 steps bigger, and that's helpful, I think.
So they're less risk averse, I guess. European investors are quite risk averse, and perhaps that I've seen that in the pharma industry. I've seen that everywhere. So the US guys, when you talk to them, you're like all completely worked up and pumped up. Speak to European investors, you feel very depressed after that.
I think what we saw with European investors, they were extremely impressed that we had a profitable business, and US investors would come to us and say, it's great that you're profitable and you can actually show this, but why, right? You could have done this faster if you burned money, right? And it's just a very different approach, but we always said, kind of explained why we didn't want to, why we decided not to do it. And to this day, I'm glad that we did our approach, but I think both approaches are fair.
So there's a question about how you source your pool of investors. How do you get to know them? How do you form your database?
Mm-hmm. Well, for us, I don't think we reached out to anyone really proactively. It was most of them inbound, right? And if you're around for a while, like we did, and the pet space is still on the technology side not very big, and as you can see in this community, it's a decent sized community, but it's us, right? I mean, this is the 200 companies there are in the field, and I guess the Purinas of the world and the pharmaceutical companies in the pet space of this world and whatever, they know who those companies are, and the investors as well, and the bankers as well, right? So at some point they're gonna come across you and reach out and have early conversations, and that's how we put this together. And then we also have some friends that are active in the VC area, so it's fairly easy to at some point then also get the conversation. But I guess it's also always better if you have somebody approach you rather than you going to someone.
Yeah, I think it's all about the relationships that you form, the networking that you do, which is why, the communities like that are important. Mm-hmm. Going to conferences are important. Taking phone calls, even if it's going to take up your time and a little bit boring, it's important, because you never know who you may fall, where you will fall to and who you will meet and how they can help you, right? Just having this very open mind. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how are you going to be selling in the US, Michael? Is it going to be, on your website? Is it going to be on Amazon? How are you going to be doing it?
So today we are selling on Amazon, on our own web shop, and on Chewy. Those are our, as far as I have in my head, the only 3 channels we do in the US. And I think that's okay for the time being. We are evaluating offline retail as well. We are evaluating other partners as well. But at this point, it's Chewy, Amazon, and our own web shop. And that's okay. We cover quite a big area of pet owners with that.
Okay, right. And your investors, how are they going to be giving you support? I mean, you mentioned that it's so important to get investors who are, it's not just about the valuation, it's not just about that. It's really investors that know the industry and that can help you go to the next level. So what are they going to be doing for you in the next couple of months and year?
So I guess it's a little bit early to say how that actually works and what the actual value add is as we go along. But what we see so far is they're, first of all, very well connected to different companies. If I want to talk to somebody at company XYZ, they have a connection, or one of their partners has, or one of their advisors has. And if we want to talk to somebody who has been very successful in an adjacent business or similar business, it's just a super easy door opener if you have somebody with the fantastic network, like it is with Guidepost that we work with. But then again, they also have the regular conversations with the bankers in the field to see which companies are looking for something like that. Now, we're not in a situation where we would do M&A, but it is still always interesting to also learn what are the strategic thinking of doing, where they are going, what are they looking for. They have done IPOs before. Or quite a few IPOs, or worked with their investments on IPOs before. This is something that's also not off the list, while not necessarily anything in the next few weeks or month, but it's something that we have on the radar and evaluate as well, and they have done this, right? And those are all the conversations. They're going to help us create a US entity now. And to kind of come back to the question from before, our US team right now, I think it's 6 or 7 people. It's not going to be huge. We currently have 125 or so in people in Austria, and then the US, we're going to add a few team members, especially around business development and marketing in that area. It's not the intention that we're going to have a huge team in the US, but we know we need presence around customer service, around marketing, and understanding the US market, which still is different.
So there's a question here from Anthony. He wanted to know how many units you've sold to date, and when and how did you start to see the sales increase? So I guess it's your trajectory, and when did you think that was going to take off? And was this an increasing demand from stolen pets?
So that's a few questions. So number one, we don't talk typically about sold units, because for me that's especially in our field of business, it's something that doesn't tell you much, because it doesn't help me if it's in someone's warehouse or in someone's store or whatever. We talk in active users, and as you mentioned before, we're quite a bit past the 400,000 active subscribers. So it's not a one-time sale, but it's actually active subscribers that use our product and pay for it. That's again north of 400,000, and we have grown, I would say, fairly linearly over time. If you look at the recurring revenue chart, you would see it more or less exponential because of the nature of recurring revenue. But in general, it has grown probably more exponential than linear. But especially if you rely a lot on word of mouth and people recommending you, then that's kind of what you will see. And stolen pets, we don't market our product as a pet theft prevention device, because you take off the collar with our device, and it's not, right? Though we have had quite a few cases where stolen dogs were recovered because they still had a Tractive on there on the collar, which also happens, but it's not something that we marketed towards that. So it's very hard to attribute any specific sales on that. There might have been some that we have had, but not there wasn't a spike because of that, I guess.
No, I think that's an interesting answer as well, because it just brings me back to the KPIs, right? We really need to understand the correct KPIs, the correct metrics that we want to measure, particularly when we're talking about a high lifetime value, and that you are in a subscription business. Then we will need to think of KPIs that is relevant to that kind of business model. And another thing for startups to really understand your business model and understand where your monetization stream is coming from, and that will actually help you understand which are the metrics that are really important for you. So that's a very good reflection based on Michael's answer. So we've got last 3 minutes. It's been so exciting. I've got so many questions that I want to ask you, but maybe last question for you is what now? You've done very well in Europe. You've done you've done a very good step in the US. And of course, we are very proud to have European companies, succeeding in the US and in Europe, obviously. So what are your next steps? I mean, what would your eventual exit be? Will it be an IPO? Will it be a M&A? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think what's next, on one hand, it's easy to explain. We have the money in the bank, right? But now we need to use it, and we have to put it to good use. So it's we're obviously working on the next generation devices, but we're also going to start penetrating the markets where we are in today, and working on the awareness factor. And we're going to do this both in Europe as well as in the US. So that's really where we're going to deploy the capital and see what works for us and what doesn't work. Work on the next generation product. We feel like we're scratching the surface of again, when I walk on the streets and talk to a dog owner, and 8 out of 10 have never heard about GPS trackers, that this exists for cats and dogs, right? I know that we're just very much at the beginning, so we're not necessarily thinking about an end game at this point. I think for us, for the first time, we raised funding, and I think we want to show very fast growth. That's the idea. And then wherever it takes us, yes, IPO is something that's certainly at the back of our heads, especially with the financial market landscape these days. Not necessarily a spec, but probably more an actual IPO. There's a lot of strategic interest from very different industries for some reason, but it's not something we have a profitable business, and there's no need for us to sell, and we want to grow from here. So whatever comes next, we always have conversations, and we'll go from there.
Keep an open mind. That's right.
Keep an open mind, exactly.
So any final piece of advice for all the startups that are here? I see a lot of startups here. I think they must be very inspired by what you have said. It's been so generous of you to be so transparent and so, really authentic. I think, Michael, that's one of your qualities. You are very approachable, you're very authentic, you want to help, you want to share, and that's something that we really appreciate. So any last piece of advice for our startups here who are working very hard to bring solutions to our pet parents? Yeah.
So I think, and I see that a lot in other startups. That's why I want to mention that one more time, and I do some angel investments as well. A lot of companies or startups try to build this instead of doing this and doing it well. Like do one thing and be the best at it, rather than trying to change the entire pet world immediately, and that maybe add horses to that. Like focus, do one thing, do it well, and then success will come from there. That would be very much my recommendation. But then again, I've only done it once with Tractive, and we're still at the beginning. So, but super glad to see the pet care technology industry or pet care startup ecosystem grow, and excited about that. And thank you so much for having me, Kim.
No, thank you, Michael. So if you are thinking of any collaborations you can have with our pet care community, you guys, where to find Michael. Drop him a note on Slack. He's very, very approachable, always full of creative ideas. So I encourage you to connect with him. Thank you so much, Michael. I really enjoyed this, and have a very, very good evening.
All right. Thank you guys very much as well. Have a great evening.
For attending.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. To the next event.